Whether your beer is in a bottle, can, or glass, kick back and relax. It's Better on Draft.
Welcome, everybody. Episode 297, Better on Draft podcast. My name is Ken. Thank you so much for joining us, folks. If you are listening via the podcast, make sure to follow us on Spotify or give us a review on iTunes. Watch us on YouTube. And if you're watching us on YouTube, go grab us on your podcast platform of choice. Once again, my name is Ken. I'm here with my co-host, starting with Robert. Robert, what are you drinking?
Right now, I am drinking... from Bottle Logic, I am drinking the Continuous Ignition. It is their caramel coffee stout, which is barrel aged and finished with caramel and Mostra roasted coffee.
Wendy, what about you?
Well, I am drinking an Aqua Dragon by my favorite homebrewing 19 Normal. And just to even things up, I have one of the Nutcase porters from Listerman from my trip last weekend.
Daniel?
Thought I'd take it out to where our guest is going to be from, close enough at least, out of Broken Boundary Brewing out in Honolulu. I am drinking a ginger.
And for myself, I am getting through all of the beers I purchased for the Remember Those Beers category or show that we did. So I got a Turbo Dog brown ale from Abita, and I also got a Deschutes Black Butte Porter. And I am going to wash it down, however, with a nice can of our guest from last week, Pabst Blue Ribbon. But with us in studio online, we have Kim from Maui Brewing. Hello, Kim. What are you drinking?
Hi. I'm drinking our Pauhana Pilsner in a can. So it's delicious, refreshing at 1 o'clock here in Hawaii. And
we appreciate you taking your afternoon with us. Now, you have been with Maui Brewing for a couple years. You have a long history of both brewing over in Maui as well as another brewery out in California, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But how did you get your start into brewing?
So I was in college and I wanted to actually become a chef. So I went to Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo. Studied food science with a culinary emphasis, hoping I would go to culinary school after college. And really in San Luis Obispo, it's surrounded by wine country. So I took a quarter off and worked at a winery. And that winery was really close to Firestone Walker. So at that time, it was before they had their big push for Passion of the Pale and a lot of their, it was like pre-Matt Brindleson years. And but still, they made incredible beers back then, really high quality. And that's when because I worked in the wine industry, I was able to get industry discounts on kegs, which was pretty sweet. I ended up really loving brewing just because it's really close to being a chef or a culinary art where you could, play around with different ingredients and within 3 weeks you could have a beer that's ready to drink and brew more often, where in the wine industry you pretty much have one harvest. You take care of that wine and try to not mess it up for 12 to 18 months. But with beer, you just had more of a creative outlet than I found in wine. So I was able to, after a few years in the wine industry, I had the opportunity to move out to Maui. Didn't really even have a job, kind of just showed up at Maui Brewing, and Garrett was in the building. And he took a chance on someone that really didn't have that much experience. I was home brewing at the time, but had no production brewing experience.
Have you been, since then, have you made any wine, whether it's at home or through maybe collaboration with another brewery that has a winemaker's license?
We actually do have a winemaker's license here at Maui. And I haven't made wine here, but we've had a few ciders that we've made in-house, just draft only. So pretty similar process. We do have a winery here in Maui, and they produce a spectrum of different wines, but they also crush and press juice for us for like our pineapple mono wheat that we produce on a monthly basis. So
And you guys have a spirits maker there too, right? Or you are a spirits maker? Is it you are one, or sorry?
We do have a DSP, so yeah, we make distilled spirits here and ready to drink cocktails. So we're kind of because we live on an island, we try to be a one-stop shop for all beverages. We also have a coffee roaster in our facility as well. We make cold brew coffee. So this is actually, I have a can of my wife's cold brew coffee from Origin. So we brew cold brew coffee here, and then Maui Brewing co-packs the coffee for us.
Well, that's going to kind of lead into my question of how you got associated with Origin, which is the name of the roaster, correct?
Yep.
But I guess that kind of answers that question, that you are married. Your wife is the owner, operator, brewer, roaster. What's her title there? Everything?
Everything, pretty much. She does she does everything. I'm technically, I guess, the director of operations for Origin, but because I have a full-time job at Maui, I just help her as I can, and especially teaching her on she's never made cold brew on a large scale, and it's pretty close to brewing. We have almost like a mash tun type of vessel, but instead of steam jacketed, it's actually glycol jacketed, so we can keep it cold the whole time. So it was definitely a learning curve, and but it's fantastic. It's one of the best cold brews I've ever had.
Coming in on Nick Paglia time. Nick, what's going on? What are you drinking?
You say my name on this show? What the hell?
Sorry, you got warrants.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? Funny story. Default judgment.
Oh.
It was a parking ticket. Don't worry about it. And they actually wiped the default judgment. Anywho, I am drinking, I got two. I got Partake's Hazy IPA. And then once that's done, I am switching over to the Orale from Shiner.
Oh, missed that beer. Oh, glad you got your default Monopoly error in your favor. Collect $20.
Yeah. Well, it certainly beat paying $65. We'll take that. We'll take a small victory.
Definitely take that. But one thing I wanted to ask about, because obviously there was a lot of jumping and buying and selling and sort of buying that was going on. But obviously, and we kind of brought it up before we started the show, is the acquisition of Modern Times and how that is expected to close in October. I guess talk to us about any experiences that you've had with Modern Times and what you're looking forward to at the close of the deal.
Yeah, I actually, so between Maui Brewing, I actually have been at Maui Brewing for 10 years and in two different stints. So I worked for Maui Brewing from 2007 to 2012. I left to work in San Diego, and where my now wife was working in the coffee industry. And I worked and helped start St. Archer Brewing Company in San Diego. So Modern Times and St. Archer pretty much started about the same time. And only really good, we were competitive friends in a sense. We're still trying to learn from each other, and they were making incredible beers, and the marketing was really strong and still is. And they were all about really pushing the boundaries of like what beer can be and what, the taste of San Diego was. Their barrel age program is amazing. They do really high quality, innovative beers. And that's really what I'm looking forward to the most as a collaboration with Modern Times and us, is to really gain experience on both sides. Hopefully they learn from us and our efficiencies and what we've done here in Maui. And then also learn from them on, how their beer techniques and their barrel aging techniques, and try to kind of combine our innovation to make the best beer possible. So it's going to be an interesting ride, and there's going to be exciting points and stressful points. But after the pandemic and coming out of this, we just have to, make changes and try to grow and, stay relevant and learn from each other. So,
yeah. And I know from a Michigan standpoint, it's we have very little distribution of Modern Times that has come out here, and obviously this is completely in the future. I'm not even going to ask whether or not this distribution of Modern Times is going to happen out here, but I will just say that with a lot of their stouts, like their Monsters Park, their barley wines, I've always thought were top notch, and I would love to see those come out here. So hopefully, I'm not, like I said, I'm not even going to ask. So it's too early, way too early. But you brought up St. Archer, and that actually brought up another one of, I would probably say, and I've only had it once, but it's still, to me, it's just been so memorable, is the Tuscan grain line of the barrel-aged beers. And there was I believe it was a coffee stout that was done that I still just always go back to that. And I guess I'm kind of curious about, just what it was like bringing St. Archer into the beer fold. How did that go?
It was a huge learning experience for me. I mean, I left Maui at the time, and I was the head brewer of a 7-barrel brew pub, going into just starting this massive, I mean, we weren't a huge brewery. We were about a 30-barrel brew house, but we went from 4,000 barrels our first year to like almost 40,000, which within 3 years. It was just a massive, like, just grinding getting this brewery done. And I was lucky enough to be able to work with some of my closest friends. So Greg Peters and Yiga Miyashiro, they were originally from Pizza Port. Greg worked at Lost Abbey, and he brought that barrel age program to St. Archer, and he's the big reason that it was so successful. And the coffee was my wife's coffee as well, so she had something to do with it as well.
That just absolutely amazing beer. One more that I was going to throw out there, and obviously with being in Hawaii, I always think in my head that there is kind of a very huge logistics issue with trying to get supplies. What is it like with trying to, obviously if you're brewing the beer, what is it like is there difficulties with trying to get supply of hops and, grains and all of that nature, all of that stuff in order to brew the beer?
Yeah, I think just because I've worked for Maui for 10 years, it gets easier, but it's still pretty stressful. Like, just as an example, we use Pilsner malt and specialty malt from Germany, from Weirmann. It used to be about 18 to 20 week lead times just to get from Germany, and they would go through the Panama Canal to Hawaii. And now it's 28 to 30 week lead times. So it's, as long as we prepare and we have good forecasting, it's not too difficult, but it is stressful. We always have to think, at least 3 months to 6 months in advance when we're bringing things in, but we can't bring in too much raw materials because they could go bad. It's humid, it's hot here. We have limited storage. We were lucky enough when we first started here at Maui where we were forced to package in cans, which wasn't the popular package at the time, back in 2006, 2007. But we were able to get cans locally made in Kapolei, Oahu, at the ball plant there, and ship them, on a weekly basis to us. So that was a huge win for us, because if we had to ship in bottles from the mainland, it'd be more expensive than the beer itself.
Wow. All right, I'm going to pass this over to Wendy.
Well, I'm curious what the beer scene in Hawaii is like, just in general. To start, we have one of our people on the chat said that Larry, he said it's great to see you. He was stationed in Hawaii from 03 to 06, and the only craft beer that they had was Gordon Biersch at the Aloha Tower Marketplace. So he's really excited.
Yeah. It was interesting. It has grown. I started here in 2007, and yeah, exactly the same. The craft beer here was mostly just shipped in, Sierra Nevada, Deschutes, Gordon Biersch was kind of the standard. When I started brewing at the pub, I made my first like West Coast or San Diego style IPA. And I remember we had comment cards back in the day where someone was like, wow, the brewer must really love hops, because I made it super dry, like dry hops. And I was like, I don't know if it's is a compliment or a critique, but I think people just weren't really used to what fresh, 3-week-year-old beer tastes like. They were used to whatever got shipped over here, maybe slightly oxidized, not as flavorful as it was, in the beginning. Since I've been back, it's a huge change, which is great. There's probably close to 12 to 15 breweries on Oahu. There's 3 here on Maui. We do get a mix of tourism here, so we're not really pigeonholed to one specific style. I mean, hazy IPAs are popular here, but because we have a whole spectrum of tourists come here, we can brew brown ales, porters, lagers, dry hop lagers, hazy IPAs, and all of it sells. So we're really trying to make beers for everyone, and we don't really have to have 80% of our mix be a hazy IPA, which is lucky for us.
For us too. So I'm a beer tripper. I don't know if that's the right term yet. I'm still looking for the right description. But why should I come and visit your brewery?
Good question. I think
other than it's Hawaii, what the hell?
I know.
I was trying to not state the obvious.
I think we bring a unique, perspective on just beverages in general. We're not just a brewery. We try to make a spectrum of beverages. We have ready to drink cocktails, of course, hard seltzer. With our spirit program here, we make whiskey and gin with local ingredients. Next year, I'm really trying to focus on farmer collabs on a quarterly basis, where we really highlight the farmers here on Maui, because we have 2 seasons for most fruit, citrus, passion fruit, guava, really trying to highlight the hardworking efforts of the farmers here. And I have an ocean view from I'm actually in Garrett's office right now. I'm trying to kick him out, but I have an ocean view right here in our office. So it's just laid back. I think just the vibe here at the brewery and everyone here is just a great place to be. It's really relaxing. The air is different here in Hawaii. It's a little bit more humid, but it's what I've called home for the last 10 years. So
does that change how you make things?
Like, make different beers?
How you look at your recipes, and have you had to tweak anything because of that?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly tweaking, even on our cores. We're really trying to make our beers better, but as much as we can, because logistics of bringing raw materials in, we try to be as sustainable as possible. I mean, that's why I think we had a big push to, work with Modern Times, brew some of our beers on the mainland, because it's just not sustainable for us to brew 100% everything and then ship it to Michigan. We want our kind of stamp, and we want you guys to drink a Bikini Blonde and really feel like you're back in Hawaii is our goal. Or come over and visit us.
It's on my list. It's a very long list. So I'm totally fascinated by your career. What are some of the reasons that you got into brewing, and how did you find yourself at Maui the first time?
So a big reason is due to my mom. She's probably the hardest working woman I have ever met, and she's a huge role model of mine. Both my parents are chemical engineers. I grew up in the Bay Area of California, and she grew up in the Philippines and immigrated here when she was about 21 or 22. And so when we were young, we would get flight benefits because she worked for United Airlines. The closest we could go back to the Philippines, we would always come here to Maui or Oahu at least twice a year. So Hawaii was kind of my second home growing up. I told them when I was 5 years old that I was going to live here one day, and they just laughed at me. But I made it true, and now they live here as well. So, but I really got into brewing, and again, when I said earlier that I wanted to become a chef, it's really my Filipino culture. So growing up in the Bay Area, my mom's siblings were all around. That is kind of how we show love, is cooking for people, really gathering together and, gaining experiences and sharing stories. So from cooking to brewing beer and anything I do in my life. I'm a woodworker too. So like anything that I'm passionate about is all about something tangible I can make and giving it to someone and really seeing that expression on their face of hopefully pure joy when they get to experience what I've cooked, brewed or even made, in my wood shop. So.
That's awesome. Nick, did you have a question?
I do. I got a couple questions. Kim, you talked about a little bit about sustainability in the lines of questions that Wendy just asked. Talk to us a little bit about the renewable energy project at Maui Brewing and what you've been able to accomplish with that program or project thus far.
Yeah, so most of it, is Garrett's passion project. He, in his spare time, anytime he has, he's looking for how to become more sustainable here. So we have an 80,000 plus square feet warehouse here. The whole roof is covered in PV solar. So that, depending on the time of year and what we're doing, that could cover anywhere from 60 to 70% of our usage. We have 20 Tesla batteries. So any energy that we're not using during the day gets stored in the batteries. And hopefully if there's power surges, that will help kind of bridge the gap. About 6 years ago, we installed a CO2 recovery system by Pentair. So we were able to recover. We have about 18 250 barrel fermenters outside. It was plumbed into the CO2 recovery. So through the first probably 3 to 4 days of fermentation, we could recover that CO2. It goes through a few steps of filtration because there's, moisture, there could be yeast, there could be any other impurities, sulfur. So it goes through filtration, goes through 3 steps of compression, gets distilled back into liquid and pumped back into our bulk tank for use. So that was a huge, because CO2 here is probably 3 to 5 times more expensive than the mainland. And even the mainland right now CO2 is really expensive. So anytime we can recapture CO2 through fermentation, which is more pure than our supplier can give us, it's a win for us. But with that, hopefully by next year, we're actually partnering with something called air capture, where we can take CO2 out of the atmosphere and turn that into CO2 for our usage as well. So
you talked a little bit about solar panels and PV photovoltaics. I'm an electrical engineer. Obviously, in a state like Hawaii, where it's pretty much sunny 99% of the time, that is probably one of the better uses of solar panels that I've personally have heard about. You talked a little bit about CO2. You mentioned about the CO2 costs rising. We've talked about it now for the last 2 weeks on this show. And now this is the first time it's come up in an interview. It sounds like Maui is doing just fine without having to seek the help of vendors. What would you say is the ratio that you guys are doing of in-house CO2 with this renewable energy project that you guys have versus what you have to outsource from suppliers and vendors from the mainland? And if you do get it from different sources, is it mostly from the mainland that you're getting it?
There's a plant on Oahu that makes CO2, but it still has to come over here on the barge. And that we had issues occasionally with like equipment failures where we didn't have CO2. So Garrett's really intelligent in the fact that, we try to implement equipment here that makes us more sustainable. We have so that we don't rely on vendors or outside vendors. With our original CO2 recovery from Pentair, it was pretty efficient right off the bat. But of course, with all equipment, the efficiency goes down over the years. So that's why we're looking into air capture. And once we get that going, we'll actually make more CO2 than our needs. And we could actually start fulfilling or selling back CO2 to our vendor itself, theoretically.
right. Anytime where there's an opportunity to generate a little bit of extra revenue, I think as any business would certainly jump on that bandwagon in a heartbeat, especially with the CO2 shortage currently going on, it really across the world, obviously here in the United States.
Right.
We're going to pass it on over to Daniel.
All right.
Some questions.
I do. So first off, I got to say it was at your location in Waikiki where I have ran into the most aggressive pigeons in my life. I don't know what you guys are doing to those things down there, but when they're willing to land on your glass while you're holding it, I don't know. It's a whole different world. I don't know what you guys are doing with those.
The beer just that good.
Yeah, it's really funny. It gets kind of annoying after a while, but it's just kind of funny. It's not just of you, of course, but the way they act down there, it's insane. It's definitely something to see if you haven't been there. I actually wanted to ask you, because you're located on multiple islands there, what's the logistics of getting your beer between locations? Are you brewing at each location? Are you brewing centrally and shipping? What's the situation there?
Yeah, we only have one production facility here in Hawaii. So that's just the Kihei facility in Maui. And we have a distributor, Paradise Beverages, that will send container loads to each island. Usually Oahu can take multiple containers a week of our beer because they get the most tourists. Or it could go to Oahu and then to the neighboring islands. So Maui and Oahu do the most. We do the most sales there.
Okay.
So we produced we're on pace for about 60,000 barrels this year, and everything produced in Maui is 100% distributed to the islands, and it's probably close to 70 to 80% of our production is just for the islands.
Excellent. Now, I had the chance of having your hard seltzers when I was out there a few months ago. Talk to us a bit about that. Is this newer? It's the first time I ran across your seltzer. I find your beer out here where I'm at in Arizona quite a bit, but the seltzer not as much. Is that? Talk to us about the process of that and where that's come up from.
Yeah, so we kind of launched our hard seltzer right when the pandemic started, and we have a different process here because we have our DSP. We're able to use alcohol from sugarcane, and we mix that with deaerated water, citric acid, and some flavoring. So we have 4 different styles. We have a passion fruit, orange guava. We have a dragon fruit and cherry hard seltzer. We have an acai, and we have a citrus kind of blend where it's like key lime and lemon. Next week, actually, we'll be commissioning a new piece of equipment from Corrosis, and it makes deaerated water for hard seltzer or other products that we make, and then it can blend and carbonate on the fly to our filler, which is going to save so much time for us and CO2. So it's a pretty quick process for us, and that's why our hard seltzers are pretty neutral and almost taste just like sparkling water, which I prefer.
Yeah, they're really amazing. I love the dragon fruit when I had a chance to try it. I want to throw it back to the Modern Times acquisition here. We've talked about it quite a bit. I don't believe this question was asked, and if you don't know the answer, that's fine as well. But are there plans to continue to use the name and keep it separate, or are you going to absorb Modern Times and turn it into Maui overall?
We're definitely keeping the brand. The brand is strong. It makes great beers. The people there are amazing. I'm actually going to Hop Selection in a couple of weeks, and the brand manager, Andrew, who's been kind of the vision behind a lot of their barrel-aged beers and most of their brands, is coming up there with me. So we're definitely keeping the brand and just kind of merging our 2 companies together, keeping both production going, and just hopefully in the future we can get them at a good point where they expand they have upgraded equipment, and we can brew at their facility and they can brew here as well. But we're definitely keeping their brand alive.
It's great to hear. It really is a strong brand. We actually had them back on episode 251 of Better on Draft. If anyone does want to go ahead and check that out. One final question. You brought up the barrel aging that Modern Times does. I don't recall ever seeing that with Maui. Does Maui currently have a barrel aging program, or is this going to be something new coming into your brewery?
We've done small projects, like right when the pandemic started, we actually did we had a bunch of beer in barrels, and we did a few releases, and they went to the East Coast, mainly into our pubs. So we do mostly draft only. We used to have a bottling machine, but now we're kind of straight cans. But we have this kind of fan favorite beer called Black Pearl, which is our imperial coconut porter, aged in rum and bourbon barrels. And then it has vanilla and coconut added to it. So we'll be bringing that back next year. We'll probably be brewing it close to December for a late 2023 release. We're not sure. It might just be draft only. People like barrel aged beers here, but it's really hot, so they'd rather be drinking, lighter, kind of more refreshing beers. But
yeah, it's 110 degrees every day here. I'll take a barrel aged beer anytime over a lot of this light stuff.
Damn
I'm gonna
right.
go. Yeah, every time. Rob too.
All day.
Me too.
Yeah, and Wendy. Yeah, pretty much everyone except for maybe Nick. He likes those NA beers that he likes to sip on.
Oh, you know what? Light me. The coldest thing in my fridge right now.
All right, Ken, I'm going to pass it back over to you.
For sure. So from our Twitch, which you guys can watch us live on Twitch every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, that's BOD Podcast, BOD Podcast. Somebody had the question, with the local farmers, has anyone thought of growing hops on the island?
yeah, so on Big Island up in Waimea, I believe, the elevation's high enough and it's cool enough to grow some hops. Not a huge amount for actually making beer, because wet hops are the poundage would be pretty great to make at least our size for our size batches. So there is some, but the hard part is it is humid. Hops are prone to disease, and I don't know how successful it is, but it is possible.
Now, we talked about the negatives that come with brewing over in Hawaii, just because it's hard to get raw materials or it takes time. Are there any positives brewing in Hawaii that maybe brewers on the mainland don't necessarily get to experience that you do?
I guess just the work-life balance. I hope everyone on the mainland gets the work-life balance too. But for here, we work hard, but we try to always play hard as well. It's nice. It almost feels like even if you're on a vacation, we can have a staycation here and feel like a tourist. We don't, because there's not really seasons here. It's warm all the time, but pretty moderate. We don't really run into any issues with weather too much. And we're able to, the brewery right now, we're about 5 minutes from the beach. So I think that just kind of gets you into a relaxed mode in general. I think a con that has been a con for a while though, but hopefully we have a solution that's coming up next month, is we've never been able to brew wet hop beers or fresh hop beers. Just the logistics of getting wet hops over here and working with Department of Ag, because we definitely don't want to endanger the local plant life here. That was always kind of a challenge and really expensive. But Alaskan Airlines and Bailbreaker out of Yakima reached out a few weeks ago, and we're doing our first fresh hop beer in September, which I'm really excited about. So they're going to be sending over some Bailbreaker. If you're not familiar, they are a brewery in Yakima, but they also started as a hop farm. So it's going to be all of their hops off of their farm. They're going to pick them. We're going to put it on an Alaskan Airlines flight, ship them over fly them over to Hawaii, and we're going to make a beer for the first time here. So I'm pretty stoked on that. We're going to be using Simcoe for the hot side, and then Citra Mosaic for the cold side.
Well, let's get into the recipes a little bit, because you actually have a long list of accolades for the beers that you've created. How did you go about making your recipes when you first started at Maui?
I was kind of vying for the head brewer job at the pub, so I would work a full week, full 40 to 50 hours at the brewery, and then go home and home brew. And because I worked at the brewery and the pub, I heard a lot of just like what people like to drink, what I like to drink at the time. And it's kind of just like cooking, where you kind of look up a recipe and you're like, okay, I like these flavors, but I'm going to put my own kind of spin on it, and just home brewing, and every weekend just kind of playing around with different brews. That was like the best way I learned how to brew. Plus, when I did get the head brewer job, I was working on a 7-barrel brew pub. And so I would brew at least 3 times a week, and it would be gone in a few weeks, and I would get to try that recipe again. So I would always kind of tweak, keep the base recipe the same, but tweak something and figure out what actually was changing throughout the process. So I got a lot of trial and error out of brewing.
Do you still have that ability brewing on the larger system now that you're back there, or are you still playing on some smaller systems as well there?
We have a 1-barrel system here that no one really uses, but we do have 2 brew houses here. We have a 25-barrel brew house and a 50-barrel brew house, and the smallest batch we could brew on the 25 side is probably like a 10 or 15-barrel batch, depending on the alcohol of the beer. So we do have a chance to play around quite a bit, and we have 4 pubs here. So even brewing a 25 or 50-barrel batch, it's almost not enough beer to give enough kegs to our restaurants that we have in Hawaii. So it definitely moves pretty fast. So we're brewing at least 3 to 4 specialties a month that we haven't brewed before, and really trying to push the brewers to be creative and make the recipes that they want to make.
Now, when you returned back to Maui Brewing from St. Archer, how had things progressed or changed since you left?
It was a huge change, because we had our facility when I left. We had the facility in Lahaina, and we had the pub in Kahana, and the main facility in Lahaina was a 20-barrel, really manual system, and they were pushing a lot of barrelage out of that small footprint. But the 80,000 square foot facility here, it's pretty automated. We have a lot bigger fermenters. So it was a huge learning curve for me, because I've never had to deal with automation before, even at St. Archer. So it was a pretty big jump for me, but I was up for the challenge, and I learned quickly.
Well, then let's take a step back. You were there at St. Archer when 10th and Blake Molson Coors took over. We did have 10th and Blake on a while ago, talking about all the breweries. We have one out here in Michigan, which they purchased, which was Atwater. What was the culture change and experience for you when St. Archer was purchased by Molson Coors?
So I was there from the purchase, and then I left about 12 months later, and I came here to Maui. So I wouldn't say there was a huge culture change, really, that in that first year I was there. I went to Wisconsin quite a bit. I went to Colorado quite a bit. They were pretty hands-off. They just kind of it was just kind of getting to know each other a little bit. And I ate a lot of cheese curds for the first time. But they were really knowledgeable. I had never seen such big facilities before. So I was really trying to really soak in what a facility of that size has, and technology wise, and they put a huge investment into their quality systems as well. So that was really great to learn from. And at the time, I didn't leave 100% because Molson Coors bought St. Archer. I was really looking to get back to Hawaii. It's where I wanted to kind of settle down and buy a house and want to live forever. So we decided to kind of pack up and And Maui, fortunately, didn't have a brewmaster at the time, so I kind of just snuck in there.
Now, oh my gosh, I definitely messed up on that one. I was trying to think of what I had. Oh man, I feel like I haven't been doing this for 7 years, but I have, and it's still like a brand new experience. I completely lost track. Rob, I know you have a question.
Well done there, Rick Perry.
Thanks.
All right. Sorry, I had to give you your oops moment. Actually, I'm trying to think of something. I actually did not really have one. I had my final question that was ready to go. That's what I was thinking of. So actually, I'm just going to use that one. I'm going to come up with something else because I just want to ask this one just to see what the thoughts are. And with the catalog that you have at Maui, what I'm curious of is, what would be the perfect beer for someone to drink after a wipeout?
Oh, I would say I make a kettle sour kind of saison beer called Land of Rainbows, and it has it's only like 5.5%, pretty tart but not really sour. It has a little bit of salt, so hopefully that wipeout, not too much salt water goes up your nose, but it's just super. It got kicked out of. I sent it to JBF a few years ago, and it got kicked out of judging because they were like, beer is in the wrong category. There's fruit in here, and it's not. There's no fruit in the beer. It's all about the Sac Bruxtois yeast and Mosaic and Heel Melon. And they thought 100% there was fruit in it, which is really cool, but also disappointing. I got kicked out. But I would say that's probably the beer I would drink if I got wiped out to make myself just to remember where I am. Usually if I'm surfing early in the morning, and it's probably one of the best places I've surfed at, just the landscape looking at the West Maui Mountains. And usually there's a rainbow that pops up.
Nice. Now, saisons I feel like they've kind of fallen off here in Michigan. I don't know about you guys, and if you've seen saisons in the last couple of years, but I mean, is that been a popular style out there?
I think it depends. Like, I'm not a huge fan of depends on. I think saisons can have a whole spectrum of flavors. There's usually like ones that I prefer, the ones that are really dry and not super funky, and just a little bit of spice and just kind of refreshing. But there's ones that can be, a huge Belgian bomb and a little bit of sweetness and high ABV. So I think I agree with you, and I call it the Land of Rainbows. I called it a saison, but it's kind of a hybrid style. I think at first, when we first made that beer, saison was kind of people knew what that meant, and because of the Sac Bruxtois yeast, it was a saison type of yeast. It's a diastaticus yeast that ferments pretty much almost bone dry, but almost has a perceived sweetness to it with all the fruity characters it has. So I think that's the main reason we called it a saison. But I agree. I don't know if that style is as popular as it once was.
Yeah, and I've got one coming up anyway. That's my dry hop saison. But back to you, Ken.
Now, I do recall the question, but I did want to ask a question. Just curious about GABF, because we're actually going to have the festival coordinator here on the show in a month or so. When sending in a beer to GABF, they don't ask you for like a recipe or anything like that, just to make sure that you're staying within the category. They just judge it based on the flavor and will tell you that you did it wrong, even though you didn't.
Yeah, when you enter, there's like a note section, or you could say brewed with. So for World Beer Cup, the last World Beer Cup, I even said in like all caps, I was like, there is no fruit in this beer. But for certain styles, they will ask. I'm not sure how that is presented on the table as they're judging. So hopefully it is, but who knows, really.
I've been able to participate in a local judge we were a media member there, and I was able to kind of see how the judging happened. And obviously they try to make the judges as blind as possible, so that there's nothing that they're able to track and see or understand or know what they are drinking. They don't want to know who they are drinking.
Right.
So I was just kind of curious if that kind of stuff would happen, where obviously you don't want to get kicked out again and again and again if you're going to run into the same issue. So having those notes is good, but I didn't see any notes when I was at that. My last question before we get into our final set of questions, and the last questions, the final questions are a little happier. So this is a little bit of a bummer of a question. But obviously in Hawaii, there is a lot of tourism. We just got through a massive pandemic, as it is still going, but not as bad as it was. People are traveling back to the state. How did you guys adapt to the transfer of going from both, I was going to say foreign, but that's not, tourists and locals, to just serving locals?
It was actually really interesting because we had going into the pandemic, we could track our brands and see what would sell the most, and what and most of that was Bikini Blonde Lager and Big Swell IPA. And when the pandemic hit, we had just hit hard seltzer, or started hard seltzer, and that was actually a saving grace for us, because in year one we produced over 11,000 barrels of hard seltzer, which saved production in that year a little bit. But we actually had an uptick in Big Swell IPA, and by quite a bit from Bikini Blonde. So it let us know what the locals like to drink. They either wanted the bang for the buck and get that 7%, beer for the cost, or, our locals just really love our IPA. And mostly when tourists come here, they're probably drinking our Bikini Blonde Lager. We were fortunate to keep most of our staff during the pandemic, and to help the community too, with all the beer that went past the best buy date. And because we have our DSP, we were able to make sanitizer for the community and neighboring islands. So our restaurant was closed, which was a huge hit for us as well, but people could come in and come get sanitizer if they wanted to. So we tried at no cost. So we really tried to stay busy and just make the best of our situation. So
perfect. Well, we are going to get into the final question segment of our show. Rob, I'll wait on you so you can think of another question. So we'll start with Wendy.
I'm good.
We'll still start with Wendy.
Yeah, go with it.
So I'm curious, if I'm coming to visit your brewery for the first time, what beer should I try?
Oh, I would say Pueo Pale Ale. I mean, that's just my favorite beer. I love IPAs. I just can't drink, 7-8% beers all the time. So Pueo is like a 5.5% beer, but it's dry hopped pretty heavily like an IPA is, but it's still it's like my garage beer. So I would say that is probably one of the beers you should have. And then our Imperial Coconut Porter. So it's a 9% Imperial Porter with about 11 pounds per barrel of toasted coconut that we toast in-house. So,
all right, you've got my attention.
Nick, what's your final question?
That question's an easy one. Favorite non-Maui beer that you are drinking right now? Not at the moment, but at this moment, but one that you're drinking that you'll go to if it's in your fridge, that sort of thing. What are you drinking?
Good question. I mean, I don't really go out and buy that much beer because I get it pretty much for free. And then people drop off beers all the time. But one of my favorite beers is Russian River's Blind Pig, just because it's super hoppy, dry, and it always gets outshined by Pliny. And I think that actually is a better beer for me in my background. So,
okay.
Daniel.
All right. I know you've been brewing for a while, but what style of beer is a beer you'd like to brew that you haven't done so far?
Ooh. I brewed a lot. I've even brewed like an onion beer before.
Well, wait a minute.
Let's talk about this onion beer.
Wow. I think we just went into overtime,
You
guys.
can't just throw that out like that.
In the last line of questioning, she throws that. All right.
Extra innings. Go.
Yeah, we are going to extra time, guys.
I guess the beer I've never brewed is a foeder fermented beer. So that's one of my goals, is to get some foeders here and maybe do some different beers with the foeder. Maybe like that farmer collab would be kind of what we do. But it was like back in like 2010, I believe. We have a festival here, Maui Onion. So we make a lot of sweet onions here. There's a Maui Onion Festival. And of course, Garrett, he always would throw out crazy ideas for me to brew. And he was like, let's make an onion beer. And I'm like, okay. So we tasted a bunch of different styles. The cooks at Kahana, I think, cooked up like charred onion, caramelized onion, and just raw onion. We tried a bunch of different beers, and we realized anything with hops was disgusting with onions. It just, the bitterness and that onion flavor just conflicted. But what did work was kind of brown ales and English mild. And it actually was kind of like a French onion soup-esque kind of beer. So what we did is we took a bunch of Maui onions. We charred a bunch and kind of got a smoky flavor out of it. And then we caramelized a ton, and we put it all in the mash tun. And it actually came through and came into the finished beer of the product. And I made about 2 7-barrel batches of it for the festival, and I was surprised people actually liked it.
Now, Nick, if you were paying attention, you would know that was in the show notes, because Zane Lamprey, fan of the show and guest of Better on Draft episode 255, actually had a drinking made easy in Hawaii, which involved drinking the onion beer.
Okay. And you know I can't read. Get out of here.
You can just dip your French onion dip in the beer.
Rob, what's your final question?
So my final question was kind of thinking into the chef background, and obviously with wanting to be a chef and dealing with beer, that there's always this thing about beer pairing. So my final question was going to be, me showing up at one of your restaurants, what's the best menu item to get, and what is the beer that pairs with it?
Ooh. I think some of the restaurants definitely have a different menu. But we do, one of my buddies is a fisherman, and he actually catches fish for our restaurants here in Kihei. So he does fresh ono or mahi. And I mean, that's, if you can catch it and eat it within a couple days, it's the best fish you've ever had. So I would say any fish product. We have fish and chips on the menu. We have fish tacos, and then our fish tacos are really good. It has a spicy kind of salsa on top, and I would pair that with our Karoshi rice lager. So it's a 3.5% rice lager. We get the rice from Japan, and it's super crushable with some spicy tacos.
There.
All right. For me, kind of half suggestion, half question. But obviously, you guys have a food delicacy out there that everybody knows called Spam. And here in Michigan, specifically Traverse City, we had a brewery called Ripe Rain that made a Magnolista pig porter, which was a porter made with Scrapple. Will we see a Spam porter from you anytime soon now?
A Spam porter, maybe, now that you suggested it. I think we've joked about it in the past, but it's not out of the picture. I guess we couldn't call it vegan. So, but
no, you probably need to clean your tanks a few times too after you to do it to make sure that it's not vegan.
You?
And Spam and Portuguese sausage beer.
Oh, yeah.
that'd be amazing.
I do prefer Portuguese sausage. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Kim, Maui Brewing, thank you so much. They can find you online, Instagram. What's your Instagram handle for Maui Brewing?
My personal one or Maui Brewing one?
Your brewing one.
It's Maui Brewing Co. I think is just the Maui Brewing one. So.
Well, we know you have somebody else dealing with the social medias over there over at Maui Brewing. That's going to do it for this episode 297. Don't forget, no news this week. We got another interview that's going to be coming out Monday. So stay tuned. If you're listening live, the show will end. We will come back at around 8:15. That's going to do it. No matter what you think of your beer, we think it's better on draft. Have a good night.
Aloha.
Thank you.